Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where today's most exciting startup founders share their stories and strategies. They also deliver tangible lessons learned along the way that you can apply to your own startup. Each episode is a true masterclass. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
Welcome to an encore presentation of Rising Tide Startups, where I reached back at the end of 2022 here, and I've asked some of my favorite guests to make a reappearance. It's been a couple of years, I think, since Mark was on, but my guest today is Mark Podolsky, aka the Land Geek. So, Mark, thanks again for joining us on Rising Tide.
Kevin Pruitt, it's great to see you again, brother.
It's good to see you. Good to see you. I just that initial intro right there just will give you some semblance of understanding of why I would want to have Mark back on, because it was so much fun the first time we chatted. But Mark, just for those that don't know or may not have listened to the first episode, give us kind of a quick bio of Mark Podolsky.
Sure. So in 2000, I was a miserable, micromanaged, 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker, specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. And Kevin, it got so bad for me, I didn't get the Sunday blues anticipating Monday coming around. I get the Friday blues anticipating the weekend going by really fast and having to be back at work on Monday.
That's like double the Sunday blues.
Yeah, exactly. So my firm hires this guy, and as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar at tax deed auctions. And he's flipping them online. He's making a 300% return on his investment. And I'm looking at companies all day long. And a great company has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow.
Yep.
Average is 10%. I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So I don't believe him. So I go to New Mexico with him. I got $3,000 saved up for car repairs. I do exactly what he tells me to do. I buy 10 half-acre parcels at an average price of $300 each. I flip them online, and they all make an average price of $1,200 each. It worked, 300%. So I took all that money, I went to another auction where I live in Arizona. Again, there's no one in the room. It's 2000. I'm buying lots and acreage for nothing, and I made over $90,000 cash. So I go to—
In what period of time?
In about 3 months, I think.
Wow.
And so I go to my wife, she's pregnant. I said, honey, I'm gonna quit my job.
I'm
a full-time land investor. She's like, absolutely not. So it took about 18 months.
I'm fully supportive of you staying where you are.
Yeah, exactly. And so it took 18 months for the land investing to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit, and I've been doing land investing full-time ever since. And I've done over 6,000 transactions. And now what I love to do, and my purpose, is to help people get out of what I call solo economic dependency, which means they're personally not working, they're not making any money. So how can I help people solve their money and time problems?
And it's such I mean, obviously it's broad geographically, but such a narrowly focused niche. You know, it's not like commercial residential, it is raw land. I mean, that is your— I mean, have you strayed from that at any time in your land geekdom time?
You know, I'm an inch wide and a mile deep. And there was one time, I want to say in 2006, I flipped a house and I made $100,000 at the top of the market. And when I looked at my time and how many times I had to go to the house and meet the subcontractors, water plants, do this and that, I'm like, this isn't a good deal. And that was it. So I had to do it. It worked out financially, but not time-wise. So, you know, I'm very morbid. I'm always thinking about my death and how precious life is and how short our time is. So, which actually makes me think, you know, I mean, it's a weird thing. It's morbid, but like I actually feel better.
Well, because I mean, it's something that you certainly consider. I mean, it is not, you know, you're just not kind of a hamster wheel, you know, mentality where you just have this dull race to death, you know.
Yeah. And it kind of just, you know, cuts through all the BS in life too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so, and then you can reverse it. I like, you know, reversing it. I think, well, it's, you know, if it's my last day on earth and I don't know what's going to be, what if it's this person's last day on earth? And you treat everybody a little bit more, you know, kindly, you're a little bit more patient with them.
Yeah.
Not with you, Kevin, personally, but anyone else.
In general, that's
in general.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's go back to, so what year was this that you took your trip to New Mexico?
2000.
So 2000. Okay, so paint that day. So you're I guess you're driving, because I think you lived out like maybe Colorado.
Well, no, I was in Phoenix. Yeah, I drove up there.
So you drive across I-40 or whatever you're on, and so you stop and you sit down with this individual and you go, okay, tell me how you do this. And he says, okay, here's the 10-step process. And you think, so let me get this straight. I'm buying swampland in Arizona off eBay, and I am going to then cut it up in pieces. How am I even going to parcel this out legally, being an absentee owner? And then somehow the deeds all match up, and the plots of land all match up, and they withstand public scrutiny or legal scrutiny. And I'm going to sell them. People are actually going to be looking on eBay or wherever it is for land, and they're going to buy it. Was there a little skepticism?
You'd think there would have been. And coming from my background, which is investment banking, I did walk through the entire model. I'm like, well, what's the worst case scenario here? And the worst case scenario was I owned raw land. I couldn't sell it.
Yeah, you have $3,000 worth of stuff you can't sell.
I got $3,000 of stuff I can't sell, which isn't that big a deal. But the bigger deal to me was my wife. Like, she's not going to walk in the garage. You'd be like, what is all this $3,000 worth of crap? Right? It's just a piece of paper. So there's nothing physical I had to maintain.
Yep.
There's nothing to protect. And it just seems so simple to me. I thought, well, worst case, I could go to my dentist and barter. Maybe they'll want a half-acre parcel in the desert, or something like that.
I've got a deal for you. This root canal that I'm gonna have, I've got some land.
Yeah, I started actually writing out all the services of people. I'm like, okay, my barber, my dentist, my doctor.
I mean, barber kind of rhymes with barter.
I was even thinking like my landscaper, like all these people in my life I could barter with, and I can't sell the land. But I also had seen, my buddy wasn't any different than me. So I'm like, well, if he can do it, why can't I do it? And was sort of like my naivete going in, which has kind of served me. And as far as like the legalities of it, I mean, I had done a little bit of research on that. Like, it's a deed, or you're transferring ownership. Yep. There's, what kind of deed are you using? Like, a special warranty deed. So there's 3 types of deeds. There's a warranty deed, which is the best type of deed. It says your warrant from the very beginning of time that there's been no liens or encumbrances or any cloud on title, breaks chain of title. But then there's something called a special warranty deed, which means that if you're buying at a tax deed auction, all you're warranting is like during the time of your ownership, you haven't clouded the title. So I would deed to special warranty deeds. And then there's a quitclaim deed, which is a terrible deed. It's usually among family members. It's just, you don't warrant anything.
Yeah.
And so, at that time, you could just kind of do a little bit of research, and it was great. And from there, I thought, well, I don't want properties that are at auction. I don't want to compete. How do I get them before they go to auction? And that's when I started creating the letter writing system and contacting the owners before they would go to auction, and creating the systems and the processes to automate this, and at 90% automated through software, inexpensive virtual assistants, and software on the back end.
So the process, and I don't want to just rehash what we talked about the first episode, but just really quickly kind of lay the groundwork. The process is, do you pre-identify where you want to target? Do you say, okay, here is the northwest corner of Colorado that has, there's a lot of just open land. It's not public land, it's private land, but it's unimproved. It's, and so I'm just going to go county by county and start looking at records and start kind of making my way through ownership and start contacting people, or is this a little more refined than that?
It's a little more refined than that. So do you ever go fishing?
Yeah.
Okay. So imagine you're out fishing and you see there's 10 boats out on the lake and they're all like on this one little cove and they're all catching fish. And then you're like, oh, wait, there's this other bank and there's only 2 boats out there and they're not catching any fish. And you think, well, where should I go? Right? What would you do? Where would you go?
Yeah, you go to the bank where everybody's fishing,
Where everybody's
where
fishing,
everybody's catching, not
where
just
everyone's
fishing.
catching the
That's
fish.
right.
So that's what I do. I look online and I say, well, where's everybody catching fish? Where's the market? And I would just start mailing there. So there's
That
platforms like
sounds almost counterintuitive.
landmoto.com and landandfarm.com, landsofamerica.com. Start there.
That almost seems counterintuitive. It almost
It
seems
is
like
counterintuitive. You think, oh, I don't want to go competition. There's no competition. It's a huge market.
So that was my next question. See, here you go, answering my questions before I ask them now. So my next question relates to like 2000s, 22 years ago. And so it was in my mind, real estate investing, that type of thing was a completely different ballgame than it is today. You have many more corporate, purchases of land, houses, commercial than you did 22 years ago. Even private equity funds are buying up, Bill Gates is buying up large swaths of farmland, now. So
right.
have you seen, is there less to buy now? Is there more competition when you go to buy, or is this just such a big place that we haven't even dented this yet?
It's so big. We haven't even dented it. I mean, there's billionaires buying productive farmland. That's not what I buy. You want to make 8%, you got $1 billion. Farmland's great. It really is. But for the rest of us, like we're making 300 to 1,000% in this inefficient market.
Yep.
So hedge funds, private equity groups, they have too much money. They're not going to buy a $5,000 parcel. They need to buy a $5 million parcel.
Right.
Ideally, they want to buy a $5 billion, parcel. So it's too small for them. And it's there's billions of acres of land available. And you couldn't think of a more boring niche. I mean, really, you can't go to HGTV or the DIY network.
It wouldn't take long.
Flip this land. The before pictures raw land. The after pictures raw land. So it's just boring.
How does the tiny house, get off grid movement, have you seen any impact at all with those? Like, I would think that a lot of land you're looking at is highly unrestricted,
highly unrestricted. I think
very few restrictions.
I think what we're going to do is actually test some tiny homes on our land and see, in owner finance it and see how that goes. My bet is that it will go well, but until you do it, you don't know. But up until now, now I have to go on Rising Tide, podcast to do it, but you're shaming me. But that is on the roadmap as far as testing a new market and see how that market would respond to, a land home package that we could finance in certain areas, right? In some areas, it's not going to be appropriate, but in more, rural areas that, have maybe a lake nearby or a lake front and are near a nicer town, then I think it would be appropriate. But, some of the land that's 2 hours from the nearest city, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. At some level, there's one thing you have to solve. There's two. You have to get water there. And the second thing you got to do is you got to get Wi-Fi there, because the people that are wanting to move off grid still want to have their MacBook, their iPhone. So somehow you gotta arrive at getting some kind of signal out there. But no,
unless you market to the Amish, and maybe that would be my niche.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Are you a technophobe?
But see, they want farmland. They don't want to live on a side of a cliff. So
that's true.
That is indeed. But so, have you seen any change in the last, from the time we talked, probably pre-COVID till now? Have you seen has there been an increase, I guess, in people interested in this? I mean, now you also have kind of a course that goes along with this as well, that you have some kind of offering that you have built a community of what type and teach others how to do this. But have you seen an uptick in that based on, people being home more, having a little more access to the internet, figuring out what's a side gig I can do? How do I transition out of my job because they're going to tell me to go back in the office 5 days a week and I don't want to do that? What are you seeing in the last couple of years, not specifically in the market, but like even around your market?
Yeah. So for Land Geek, like the training company, 2020 was our best year. And it's kind of weird to say considering that so many people were suffering. And I personally wasn't, from a business standpoint, maybe from a mental health standpoint.
Yeah,
for sure. But not from a business standpoint. But 2021 was not as good as 2020. And this year is going to be better than 2020. And I think the reason that this year is going to be better than 2020 is inflation. So land is an amazing inflation hedge. And people, I think, are seeing that there is just so much uncertainty in the world. Even if you have a job, now's the time to have a good side hustle that is, relatively simple to operate. And I think that's why, I mean, again, I'm guessing. I really don't know, but that would be my guess.
Right. So why do you think 2021 was down over 2020? Because people are going back to the office, people are just fatigued from 2020. What do you think was the reason?
My guess would simply be that the people that were, going to make a change in their lives, they did it in 2020.
Yeah.
And that was just an anomaly, and that you needed this external sort of event to happen for people to take this massive action.
Right.
And then they did it, and then you absorb the impact of it over time. And then we see 2021, it's almost becoming like the new normal, and we're getting used to masks, we're getting used to social distancing, we're getting used to this sort of just weirder way of being, and working remotely and doing all those things. Again, that's my guess.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's probably straight up legit. I mean, because I doubt that the course content changed. I doubt that your marketing, outreach type changed much. And if you just saw a drop, there was probably some, extenuating circumstance that would have caused that to happen. But it's funny because so many people that, and I don't want to lump you in with this kind of generic group of, people that started a side gig, they did so well, then they said, I'm going to do a course to teach others how to do it. And then all of a sudden they're focusing on their course, and they kind of lost the, the taste for doing the thing that, started them. Or there's this other group that started something, it had a little success, they wrote a course or a book about their projected, what they thought they were going to do, and they never reached that, but the course makes it look like they did, and then they sell their course and they're successful that way. But it sounds like to me that you've always kind of viewed the course almost like a secondary focus. I mean, your job is to buy land and flip it.
Yeah. I mean, that's really my job, is to be good at what I teach, and continuing. I have a philosophy called Kaizen. It's a Japanese term for continuous improvement. So we have to be a step ahead of everyone else if we're going to teach it.
Yep.
And ideally 2 steps ahead. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's, it is kind of a joke, what you see out in the marketplace. And, for me, like, I won't take a course from anybody that doesn't have gray hair, right? Like, you've got to be doing something at least 10 plus
this may
years,
look a different color,
right?
gray.
Like, if you're 20 something, you got a Lambo, like, you haven't really been through
18-year-old life coach.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but people do it, and look, I think that even those terrible courses, if you get one thing out of it, it might be worth it.
Yeah.
And it might be worth just knowing, like, hey, maybe you should go to somebody who has more experience next time.
Yeah. Hey, exactly right. I mean, like coaches, I think of athletic coaches I had, sometimes, and even like supervisors at jobs and leaders, that sometimes I learned more from those that I didn't think were doing a good job than the ones that actually were doing a good job. So, I learned what not to do, type things. So
Yeah, absolutely. And people always
internally.
ask me, because people go through our training program and then become coaches, like literally like right after our training, and they just copy it.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, they start getting some success. They're like, I'll coach. And I always make the joke, like, Bill Belichick has a bunch of assistant coaches. If you guys know what Bill Belichick is, he's
Yep.
head coach of the New England Patriots, and he's won 6 Super Bowls or 7 Super Bowls or something crazy, like the winningest coach. But all his assistant coaches would end up getting head coaching jobs, and none of them ever had as good a record as him.
Yeah.
And so, there's this Hydrox cookie kind of thing going out in the world, but you always, people can always kind of get a sense like who's the real deal and who's not. And or you just make a mistake, you're like, oh yeah, next time I'll eat the Oreo.
Yeah.
I won't have the Hydrox.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So what do you let's play Nostradamus here for a while. So what do you prognosticate that this land, this Sutter's Mill land grab is going to do for the next 5 years or so? I mean, when you look at raw land, and it kind of leads me to another question, but I want you to answer that one first. So what do you think?
Yeah.
What does it look like projected out in the next 5-10 years?
So Kevin, every morning I ask myself the same question. If everything's going to change, and everything is going to change, what's not going to change? And I think what's not going to change, and we can argue this, but this is what I really don't think this is going to change ever. I think people will always want a good deal, and they'll always want a real asset.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as those two things remain true, I think the land business is a really exciting place to be for the future.
Is there a learning curve for buyers? Like, I can see if you came to me and say, hey, I want to sell you a residential lot in a lakeside lot that's 15 minutes outside of the community you live in, where we project that homes are going to be built out there. There's going to be businesses moving out there. That's where the city is expanding toward that direction. That makes perfect sense to me. What doesn't make perfect sense to me necessarily is like you say, you know what, in northern Arizona, 300 miles from the Grand Canyon, 50 miles to the nearest gas station, I have a piece of property that's dirt. It's just flat dirt. It's 1,000 by 1,000 feet square. You can buy that for $2,500. And I'm like, but why? Why would I want to own? It's like buying property on the moon. Why do I want to buy property on the moon? So what is there a learning curve with buyers? Like
there is.
What's the value?
You got to learn. And I learned this the hard way.
I mean, I'm a terrible salesperson for remote land.
Did I tell you this story?
No, I don't know.
So this is very early on in my career. And me and my buddy are out looking at land. And I'm telling you, Kevin, you ever heard of Las Vegas, New Mexico?
Yep.
Okay, it's like there's a university up there, but we were looking at rural land out there. And to me, it looked like Chernobyl. I mean, it was the ugliest land I'd ever seen. And it was rural, and we could buy it over the counter. So this land was so bad that it went to auction for back taxes, and no one bid on it. So you could buy it over the counter for $50 a lot. This is a half-acre lot for $50.
Wow.
So
you get there and say, I know why.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like 1,000 of them. So there's a lot of them. I don't know how many there were. There are a lot. So my buddy's like, hey, do you want to split it? You take half, I'll take half. And I'm like, dude, I can't buy any of this. Like, no one's going to buy this, number one. But if they do, and they go out and look at it, they're going to want a refund, or they're going to sue you. So he's like, look, it's $50. He's like, if I double my money, they sell for $100 each. But what do I care? I'm like, yeah, whatever. You're going to get sued, or you're going to have refunds. I'm out. So he starts selling them. He starts emailing me the sales. and he's making like 10x. And I just email back. I'm like, refund. Then he just sends me another sale. I said a refund / lawsuit. This goes on. He sells out. And he made like, I want to say 100 grand. 50 of that would have been mine. And so I learned from that day, it's a $50,000 mistake. There's a pig for every barn, and I'm not the market. And guess how many refunds he had?
I'm guessing a goose egg.
He had 0 and no lawsuits. And to this day, I've had, no lawsuits, knock on wood, but, very few refunds. And even in our policy, like we have a simple philosophy, like happy customers guaranteed. So if you go out there, you got 90 days additional due diligence, because people often buy it sight unseen. I'm like, go out there. If you don't love it for any reason, I'll either exchange it for property you do love or refund you. Rarely happens. Then I have a 365-day exchange guarantee. They can't make it out there in the 90 days. And that rarely happens. So
wow.
My guess is there's people out there in the world that don't like people. They want to be away from people. There's preppers. There's people that are preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. There's people like military people that know how to live, off the land. And then there's legacy investors like, well, this thing lasts forever. At that price, let's say $2,500, one day it might be worth $100,000. And it can just be a legacy investment, go generation to generation. It's still a scarce resource. And the population continues to grow. So that's my best guess.
So why do you think there's a legal risk? Because it seems like to me that the biggest risk would be misrepresentation. And like you said, you sold it for something that it wasn't. But I would think if your description was accurate, what could they potentially sue you for?
Well, I guess, during due diligence, you could get sued if there's an environmental issue. So before you buy any property, like we teach people, go to epa.gov, make sure you're not buying a Superfund site, make sure you're not buying near an industrial area, make sure no one's dumping on your property. Certainly if somebody gets hurt on your property, they could sue you. I mean, you could sue anybody for anything.
Yeah, but you probably have insurance to cover that.
So yes, you have an umbrella policy that covers you if you own a home. I mean, it just rarely happens. I mean, this isn't, in real estate, the joke is it's not a matter of if you're going to be sued, it's a matter of when. But when you're talking about a $10,000 piece of land, no one's suing you for that.
Or 500.
Or 500. I mean, it's just not. I mean, it's not real money. It's not worth it.
How do you deal with squatters?
Yeah, you contact the local attorney, and then the local attorney draws up some paperwork, sends it to the local sheriff. Sheriff then goes and escorts off the squatter.
In every state except California.
Well, then you got a new neighbor in California.
Exactly. That's right. You got a co-owner of the property.
You got a co-owner of the property. Start sending them meals. You just start taking care of them.
Exactly.
But that's just California.
Oh man, it's been so good to catch up today and just to be able to laugh and enjoy 27 minutes of just knowledge. I mean, just really education around this whole space, because it's very interesting to me. And man, I could ask you questions and we could talk about this for hours. I mean, it's because I do think it's you talk about it being boring, but there's, I mean, a lot of boring things are pretty lucrative, in how they, and like, there's a lady on LinkedIn now named Cody Sanchez that talks about buying boring businesses and, laundromats and car washes and things like that people like. I want to do something fun. I want to own a coffee shop, or, I want to own a bespoke clothing brand or something like that. And they're like, yeah, but when you open that little box of quarters, it's full, every week. So there's something about funds in the fun, that of a boring business. But man, is there anything that we just haven't touched on that you think would be really helpful to our audience, just really either in this space or just kind of in general, running a company, setting up an LLC type thing, just a couple of really quick lessons you've learned that you think would be helpful to founders as we wrap up today?
I mean, I think that, number one, if you're interested in learning how to do anything, do it, right? So I've got a free course on how to double your money 30 days or less in land investing. So try it for free and see if it resonates with you. And if it does, then you can go deeper into it. So if you go to landgeek.com/quick deals, you can take a free course, thelandgeek.com/quick deals. And then as far as, a CEO mindset, I think a CEO needs to be constantly thinking about who and not how. There's that great book by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan, Who, Not How. And so it's not a matter of how do I do this? It's who do I know or who can I find that can do this? And that's really being the CEO. And so often people think, well, I don't know how to do it. Well, so what? I mean, we don't know how to do like 99% of the things in the life, right? I mean, I wouldn't know how to build an iPhone. I love my iPhone. I mean, there's no way I could do it. So individually, we're getting dumber. Collectively, we're getting smarter. Use the collective and take advantage of it. I mean, there's never been a better time in history to be an entrepreneur. We have access to global talent. We have unbelievable technology at our fingertips. It's never been safer in the world. And stop reading the news. Be grateful.
Amen, brother. What a way to stop reading the news. That's exactly right. Get off the socials and stop reading the news. What a way to wrap us up today. Well, Mark, man, as always, it's a pleasure to chat with you, and just thank you again for just taking time. And I hope that you are on the mend and feeling much better soon. I know that he's dealing with some health issues right now, but he graciously jumped on the call anyway. So thanks for just sharing your expertise and, man, just livening up the place for 30 minutes and just once again playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Mark, have a great weekend.
Another episode in the books. We hope you heard some great takeaways. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review on iTunes and YouTube. As always, thanks for listening to Rising Tide.